For those curious why I don't call what I do AI, it's more of a semantic issue than what would end up being reality for people who would end up playing the games. But as you can see, a lot of my stuff is closer to the concept of procedural content generation, rather than stuff related to things like machine learning, deep learning, and stuff like that. With procedural content generation, there's usually a set of rules that something has to follow, such as having a big gigantic array and placing constraints on what can be pulled from a list based on things that it's not allowed to pull from a list. Other videos have talked about Sudoku being kind of an example of this. But how I use it is I generate a bunch of maps ahead of time using procedural content generation. You can find that here, where the if not is the constraints that the algorithm is able to use to structure, put a little bit of structure toward its random content generation. And then the way that it's phrased in this version, it makes it seem like an enemy is tracking the player. But the way that I intend it is that the environment itself is supposed to be aware that the player exists and reshapes itself so that the player is constantly in danger of changes in the environment. Some games that I'm influenced by with this are the PlayStation 2 versions of Prince of Persia, where you can see like the walls crumbling and things like that. It's very gothic in a way, despite the fact it's called Prince of Persia. But it's sort of like that, where I want to be able to modify the environment so that it's more dangerous for the player to be in. And that requires a little bit more than just generating a map at random, because the map itself has to be aware that the player exists so that it can change itself based on like where the player is at. With machine learning, it's generally done a bit differently. There's different forms of it out there. There's decision trees, naive Bayes. I used to do naive Bayes when I would like train a Bayesian algorithm on the statistical probabilities of my constructed language. But that was one of the things that I worked on over the years. It did not end up actually becoming all that relevant in my games. And so what I do is closer to, like, I guess, classical AI. Whereas AI companies, they're doing more stuff related to things like machine learning.